There's something undeniably magnetic about the person who can walk away, not out of bitterness, not to play games, but with calm strength and quiet dignity. In the arena of relationships, romantic, social, or even professional, the individual who can step back without drama, without pleading, without neediness, holds a kind of power that most people never truly cultivate. This is not about manipulation. This is not about withholding affection or attention to toy with someone else's feelings. No. This is about self-respect. It's about understanding that attachment without boundaries breeds dependency, and that true connection only thrives when both individuals stand firmly in their own value. You're watching the Everlasting Stoic, and in this video, we're gonna go deep, very deep, into why walking away not only protects your self-worth, but actually increases your attractiveness. We'll explore the inner mechanisms that make distance alluring, how silence reveals truth, and how becoming the one who can walk away shifts the entire dynamic of connection. As always, this channel is about more than tricks or tactics. It's about the kind of inner strength that no one can take from you. Strength rooted in Stoic philosophy, in wisdom, in timeless principles that shape not just your relationships, but your identity. If you value this kind of long-form, deep transformation content, subscribe now, hit that like button, so the algorithm knows this message matters. And most importantly, stay to the end. You'll walk away with a perspective shift that may change how you handle connection, desire, and even heartbreak for the rest of your life. Now, let's begin. 1. Take ownership of your value. At the heart of walking away is this: you know what you're worth. That may sound simple, but few people live that truth. Most cling to relationships, interactions, or even scraps of attention because they haven't fully owned their intrinsic value. They seek validation not from within, but from the eyes of others, trying to be liked, wanted, approved of. They don't walk away because they're afraid of losing something that in truth may not be serving them in the first place. But when you start from a place of internal grounding, when you've wrestled with your demons, faced your insecurities, and chosen to build a strong inner foundation, then you become different. You no longer chase people who are lukewarm. You no longer tolerate being breadcrumbed, and you certainly don't beg for affection, because you understand your presence is a gift, not a negotiation. This is one of the great teachings of Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do. Only what you do. That's what we're aiming for. Not cold detachment, but grounded self-command. You don't need their approval to affirm your worth. You affirm it by how you carry yourself, by what you walk toward and what you walk away from. When you know your value, walking away isn't even an act of aggression. It's an act of alignment. You're not punishing the other person. You're simply removing yourself from a space where your presence is not deeply honored or reciprocated. But here's the deeper secret. This kind of self-assured distance is incredibly attractive. Why? Because it's rare. Because it signals emotional maturity. Because it communicates, non-verbally, I am not dependent on you for my sense of wholeness. I choose to be here, but I don't need to be. It's the very opposite of desperation. And in a world flooded with people who anxiously chase after attention, the one who can calmly retreat stands out like a mountain amidst clouds. Let's be clear. Owning your value doesn't mean becoming arrogant. It doesn't mean putting others down to elevate yourself. It means cultivating a quiet confidence that speaks for itself. A person who has done the work, who knows their standards, and who refuses to settle for less. Now, maybe you've been in a situation where you kept showing up for someone who didn't fully see you. Maybe you made excuses for their indifference. Maybe you lowered your standards in the name of love, only to feel emptier with each passing day. But here's the truth. The more you overextend in the name of being loved, the more you erode the foundation of self-respect. And once that's gone, attraction follows close behind. But when you stop, when you take a step back, when you pause the pursuit and say to yourself, I deserve more than this, something shifts. You begin reclaiming your energy, your self-trust, your voice. And the world, whether consciously or unconsciously, starts responding to you differently. In relationships, we often fear that walking away will lead to loss. And sometimes it does. But more often, walking away creates space for clarity, for truth, for growth, and sometimes for renewed respect. If someone values you, they will feel your absence. And if they don't, then you've learned something equally valuable. Either way, you win, because you've honored yourself. So here's a reflection for you as we close this chapter. Think of a time when you stayed too long, when you gave too much, when you compromised who you were to keep someone else close. What did it cost you? Now flip that. Imagine the strength it would take to walk away not with anger but with grace, not to punish but to protect your peace. What kind of person do you become when you move like that? If you've ever had to make that kind of choice, or if you're facing it now, share your thoughts below. Tell me what you learned from walking away. Or if you're still in the process, just write, I am reclaiming my value. Let that be your commitment. Let that be your signal to the world and to yourself. Now let's go deeper. 2. Absence creates craving. We live in a world of constant stimulation. Messages, notifications, stories, updates, always on, always available. In that world, the most powerful signal of value is no longer presence, it's absence. Absence interrupts patterns. It shakes the nervous system. It breaks the cycle of expectation and routine. That's what makes it so psychologically potent. When you're always available, always initiating, always responding within seconds, you blend into the noise. You become part of the white background of everyday interactions, expected, predictable, and eventually taken for granted. But when you withdraw, when your energy is no longer immediately accessible, it sends a powerful message. You are not endlessly available. You are a limited, valuable presence. And the human mind reacts to that scarcity. It starts to wonder, to notice, to feel the void. Just like you don't miss air until you can't breathe, people don't feel your presence fully until you've stepped away. That's not manipulation. That's a truth rooted in human psychology and reinforced by Stoic principle. That value is amplified by limitation. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly." That's a radical call to withdraw from trivial concerns, to value your time, your life, your energy. And it applies directly here. Every moment you spend chasing validation is a moment you're not living with purpose. Every drop of energy you pour into someone who doesn't see you is a theft from your own becoming. But when you pull back, when you let absence speak, you reallocate that energy inward. And in doing so, you shift from seeker to center. You stop orbiting around someone else's gravitational field and remember that you are your own sun. This is the paradox. When you give people too much of you, they often stop seeing you. But when you give them the gift of your absence, not in cruelty, But in confidence, they're forced to remember what it felt like to have you near. They remember your presence not as an entitlement, but as a privilege. And it's not just emotional. There's neuroscience behind this. The brain responds to space by filling in the gaps. Just as it completes the missing pieces of an image or a sound, it begins to obsessively imagine what it cannot immediately access. That's why people ruminate more about those who have gone silent than those who remain loud and constant. In silence, imagination grows. In absence, craving begins. But remember, this only works when it's grounded in authenticity. If you're pulling away to get a reaction, you're still controlled by the other. If you're walking away because you know your value, then the energy shifts in your favor. This isn't a performance. It's a return to sovereignty. Here's something most people don't realize. Your absence teaches others how to treat your presence. When they feel what it's like not to have your attention, your voice, your warmth, they begin to realize its weight. And if they don't, then you've discovered the truth earlier than you would have by clinging. So, if you've been overgiving, if you've been too available, too present, too eager, this is your sign to recalibrate, to let absence say what words never could. Because in the space where you once stood, something powerful grows. Reflection, realization, and in many cases, regret. I want to hear from you on this one. Have you ever stepped back and watched someone suddenly realize your value only after you were gone? Or are you realizing now that you've been too present in someone's life who hasn't earned it? Tell me in the comments. My absence is not punishment, it's power. If you feel that truth, affirm it below. Now, let's take it further, because space doesn't just trigger craving. It sparks something deeper. 3. Space builds curiosity. If absence creates craving, then space builds curiosity. And curiosity, my friend, is one of the most powerful forces in human connection. We are wired to seek what we don't fully understand, to explore what we can't quite grasp, to pursue what feels just out of reach. This is the paradox of intimacy. The closer we get, the more mystery we lose. And when mystery disappears, so often does desire. But here's the twist. Space doesn't mean disconnection. It means creating room for others to wonder about you again, to imagine you, to question your next move, to feel uncertain about your emotions, your thoughts, your direction. And in that space, they become active participants in the relationship, not just recipients of your attention, but seekers of your essence. When you stop explaining yourself endlessly, when you stop oversharing, over-texting, over-clarifying, you become intriguing again. People don't crave what's obvious. They crave what's elusive, yet grounded, warm, but not smothering. Present, but not predictable. Think of the great philosophers, artists, and leaders throughout history. They weren't alluring because they were always shouting. They were alluring because they spoke less and carried more. Their silence held gravity. Their space created questions, and questions, unanswered, build fascination. Seneca reminds us, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And much of that waste comes from trying to fill every gap in a relationship with noise, every pause with reassurance, every silence with explanation. But what if, instead of filling every void, you allowed space to do its quiet work? This isn't about being cold or distant. It's about being disciplined in your availability. If you're always explaining yourself, always present to solve every problem, always there to make things easier, you become less of a person and more of a service. And services, no matter how valuable, are expected. People don't fantasize about services. They fantasize about mysteries. But let me be clear. Mystery doesn't mean manipulation. It means having depths that aren't immediately accessible, layers that take time to unfold. A life that is rich outside the relationship. When you cultivate that, people can't help but become curious. They wonder where you went, what you're thinking, why your energy shifted. And if they care at all, if there's any attraction, any spark, they lean in. They chase, they ask, they try to decode you. And that's when the dynamic transforms. When you become curious to someone, you enter their mind in a new way. Not just as someone they like, but as someone they need to figure out. And the moment someone wants to understand you is the moment they start investing in you emotionally. That's where attachment begins. Not from availability, but from intrigue. Too many people try to make themselves attractive by overcompensating. They give, they prove, they justify. But true attraction is rarely found in giving everything away. It's found in what you hold back, in what you protect, in the pieces of yourself that are earned, not advertised. So ask yourself this. Do people have to work to understand you, to experience you? Or have you made yourself so easy, so available, so transparent, that there's nothing left to uncover? Remember, space isn't emptiness. It's the container that gives shape to connection. Without space, there's no tension. Without tension, there's no depth. Without depth, there's no desire. And when you master the art of holding space, not out of fear, but from self-trust, you become the kind of person who is not only wanted, but unforgettable. Let's keep going. Because silence doesn't just create curiosity. It also reveals the truth. 4. Truth emerges through silence. Silence is not just the absence of sound. It is the revealing force behind all that is real. When you stop talking, when you stop chasing, when you withdraw your words, your calls, your presence, what is left behind? The truth, the actual temperature of the relationship, the actual weight of their desire, the actual extent of their emotional investment. All of it becomes visible only in the silence. We talk ourselves into delusion more often than we realize. We interpret vague texts as affection. We justify silence as they're just busy. We manufacture connection from crumbs. But when we go silent, not out of spite but from clarity, those illusions start to crumble. Because if someone truly values you, your silence will speak louder than any word ever could. In romantic dynamics especially, silence is the great revealer. When you stop reaching out, when you give them space without resentment, you allow the natural balance of desire to recalibrate. You learn who initiates when you're not always the one holding the rope. You learn who leans in and who lets go. And that's the terrifying part for many people. Because they already suspect the answer. They know deep down that they've been overextending, that they've been trying to force something that was never mutual, that they've been filling all the gaps so the other person never has to show up at all. So they fear silence, because they fear what it will reveal. But the Stoic does not fear truth. The Stoic embraces it, even if it wounds, even if it requires the death of an illusion. As Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because the path to inner peace demands that we sacrifice appearances. We let go of stories and face reality directly. No more delusion. No more pretending. Silence, in this way, is the scalpel that cuts through fantasy. It removes the clutter. It purifies the space. And paradoxically, When used from a grounded place, silence can do what words never could. It can bring clarity, provoke longing, and even restore balance. But only if it's real, only if you've genuinely accepted whatever outcome may come. If you go silent while obsessively checking your phone, waiting for a response, you're still trapped. That's not strength. It's performance. Real silence is internal. It's a release, not a pause in manipulation. When you stop speaking, you begin to listen, not just to them, but to yourself. You hear your own needs, your own emotions, your own inner clarity rising to the surface. You stop confusing effort with connection. You stop bargaining with fate, and in that silence, you remember you were whole long before they entered your life, and you'll be whole long after. But silence does something else too. It forces the other person to confront their own feelings. Without your constant presence to distract them, without your daily affirmations, your predictable reach-outs, your predictable comfort, they are left alone with their thoughts. And that's where truth comes for them too. Some people will miss you. Others will forget you. Either way, you learn. And that knowledge is power. So, if you've been afraid to let silence do its work, ask yourself why. What are you afraid it will show you? And are you truly willing to trade your peace just to delay that truth? Because here's the Stoic answer. Better to be wounded by truth than comforted by illusion. Let silence be your teacher. It never lies. Now let's talk about one of the most important shifts you can ever make in the psychology of attraction and why walking away puts you in that position. 5. Become the pursued, not the pursuer. The dynamic of pursuit tells you everything about the balance of power in a relationship. And no, this isn't about games. This is about polarity. About who is leaning forward and who is standing still. About who is trying to prove and who simply is. In most relationships, especially the ones that become unhealthy, there's someone who's doing too much, over-initiating, over-explaining, over-investing. And the more they do, the less the other has. The pursuer carries the emotional weight, while the pursued decides how much, if any, of their attention to give back. But what happens when the pursuer stops? When they fall silent? When they walk away, not with venom, but with peace? Suddenly, a void appears. A reversal begins. And the one who had grown comfortable in their role as the emotionally passive now has to decide, do I step up or let this go? This is how you shift the dynamic. Not with begging, not with confrontation, but with stillness, with self-respect, with that quiet stoic power that says, I do not chase. I attract what is meant for me. I release what is not. Think about it. When you're constantly pursuing someone, you're signaling that their value is higher than yours, that their attention is the prize, that their affection is something to be earned. But when you become the one who is pursued, you're no longer seeking validation. You're standing in such deep, authentic alignment that people are drawn toward you. Curious, intrigued, and yes, even a little off balance. Because true attraction lives in asymmetry. It lives in tension, in mystery, in the unpredictable rhythm of someone who doesn't need you, but could choose you. That's the person people chase. That's the person people dream about. Becoming the pursued isn't about pretending. It's about becoming. You become so whole, so engaged with your own purpose, your own growth, your own center, that others feel pulled into your gravity. You stop orbiting around them, and they start noticing your sun. In the context of Stoic philosophy, this is nothing new. It's the archetype of the anchored man. The man who moves with purpose, who doesn't flinch in discomfort, who doesn't collapse when affection is withdrawn. He is not needy, but nor is he cold. He is simply himself. And that makes him rare. Here's something powerful. The moment you stop trying to win someone over is the moment they start questioning why you ever had to. And in that question lies a deep opportunity for transformation on both sides. Because when you stop chasing, you give people the space to choose you without pressure. And if they do, it's real. If they don't, then your silence saved you from a longer illusion. Now, I want you to reflect deeply. Have you been the pursuer for too long? Have you abandoned your center just to keep someone else close? If this hits home, I want you to drop a line in the comments. I do not chase what is not aligned. Let it be your vow, your anchor, your signal to yourself that you're done overreaching. Next, we'll explore one of the most powerful applications of walking away. How it can help you break deeply ingrained emotional patterns. 6. Break patterns by breaking contact. Humans are creatures of pattern. We live in cycles, routines, rhythms, many of which are unconscious. In relationships, these patterns become deeply embedded. Who texts first? Who apologizes? Who pulls away? Who gives in? Over time, these dynamics calcify into emotional ruts, and the longer they persist, the harder they are to notice, let alone escape. The harsh truth is this: if you don't interrupt these patterns, you will repeat them over and over again, until the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of change. This is where walking away becomes more than a gesture. It becomes a reset, a sacred disruption. Most people don't realize how tightly they are locked into behavioral loops. They keep showing up in the same way, using the same words, expecting different outcomes, and wondering why nothing changes. They say, "I've tried everything." But the one thing they haven't done, the one thing they avoid, is breaking contact entirely. Why? Because it's terrifying. Because in silence, the pattern collapses, the dance stops, the familiar tug-of-war vanishes, and suddenly, you're alone with yourself. But that is exactly where transformation begins. Only in stillness can you see the machinery of your relational habits. Only in distance can you perceive what proximity has numbed. Let's be clear. Breaking contact is not about revenge. It's not about sending a signal to the other person. It's not about passive aggression or moral superiority. It's about pulling yourself out of the fire long enough to realize you were burning. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is step back and ask, why am I still here? Not out of loyalty, not out of hope, but out of compulsion, out of addiction to a pattern that doesn't serve you. The Stoics spoke of this inner battle constantly. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. That includes the way others respond, the way they change or don't. What lies in your control is how you choose to engage. And sometimes the most courageous choice is to stop engaging at all." There's a powerful metaphor in nature. When a forest becomes diseased, fire becomes necessary. Destruction becomes healing. The flames clear away rot, parasites, and dead wood, making space for new growth. It is violent, yes, but also purifying. So it is with emotional detachment. Walking away severs the cord that keeps old habits alive. It reclaims your bandwidth. It reboots your nervous system. It tells the world, and more importantly, yourself, that you are no longer participating in cycles that dim your light and drain your strength. But this is also where withdrawal becomes deeply spiritual. Because when you break contact, you're not just walking away from them. You're walking back to yourself. You begin noticing things you forgot. The sound of your own thoughts, the contours of your identity, the passions and callings that were once overshadowed by constant emotional management. This space is painful, but also liberating. And in that liberation, something sacred can be rebuilt. It's also where clarity returns. Because when you're too close to someone, your vision becomes distorted. You excuse behavior. You minimize harm. You label toxicity as love. But silence is a lens that sharpens everything. Suddenly, you see what was there all along, but obscured by noise. And if the other person responds, if they break the silence, reach out, express regret, that's fine. But your decision to walk away was never about their response. It was about your freedom. There's one more layer here. When you break contact, you give both of you a chance to confront what's been buried beneath the repetition. Sometimes, absence awakens the very accountability that presence failed to inspire. Sometimes, silence becomes the mirror they never wanted to face. But if it doesn't, then you have your answer. And that answer, no matter how painful, is still a gift, because it sets you free. So I challenge you, if you're caught in a cycle that's eating away at your peace, don't just take a step back, step out entirely. Not forever, perhaps, but long enough to see clearly, long enough to heal, long enough to choose your next move from truth, not habit. And if you've done this before, if you've broken contact with someone, not in anger but in liberation, tell your story. Share what you learned. Or just write this in the comments below. My silence broke the pattern. Let it be an affirmation, a marker of growth, and a signal to others who may still be caught in the storm. Now, let's move into a subtle but powerful reason why walking away creates a lasting emotional imprint. 7. Trigger positive nostalgia. There's a moment that comes after someone walks away. It doesn't arrive immediately. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It creeps in slowly, like morning lights sliding under the door after a long night. And that moment is called nostalgia. But not just any nostalgia. A specific, personal, emotionally resonant kind. Positive nostalgia. It's the involuntary remembrance of warmth, of connection, of moments that once felt effortless. And paradoxically, it often doesn't arise while you're still around. It arises after you've left. Here's the irony. People rarely feel your full emotional weight when you're present. When you're near, you're part of their routine. You're part of the background noise. But once you're gone, the mind begins to replay, to reflect, to highlight the beauty it once overlooked. This is not manipulation. This is human psychology. The brain is a pattern-seeking, contrast-based machine. It does not appreciate something fully until it senses its loss. When you're gone, truly gone, not pretending, the contrast kicks in, and suddenly moments that once felt small now seem golden. They remember the way you laughed at their worst jokes, the warmth in your voice during cold nights, the calm in your presence when everything else was chaos. These aren't always conscious memories. They're feelings, sensations, echoes. And in many cases, it's the silence that allows those echoes to be heard. The Stoics understood this phenomenon even if they didn't name it. In fact, they actively practiced a version of it. Marcus Aurelius often meditated on loss, not to despair but to sharpen appreciation. By visualizing absence, he increased his presence, and this is the same gift your silence gives to others. You see, when you're always there, people stop imagining life without you. But when you walk away, you give them a glimpse of that void. And in that void, if love ever existed, nostalgia begins to bloom. The mind is selective. It amplifies what it misses. And people don't usually miss the fights, the tension, the anxieties. They miss the comfort, the feeling of being seen, the sense of familiarity. And often, it takes your absence to realize how much you added to their lives. But here's the deeper beauty: you can trigger this without bitterness, without intention. Simply by focusing on you. When you let go, work on yourself, pursue growth, heal your wounds, elevate your purpose, you become not just a memory they can't stop revisiting, but a symbol of what they once had and lost. This is not about hoping they come back. This is not about leaving breadcrumbs. It's about allowing the emotional reality of your value to echo after you've left. And sometimes, that echo is what leads to realization, change, even regret. Now, not everyone will reach that point. Some people will remain oblivious. Some will rewrite history. Some will convince themselves they never needed you at all. But those are not your people. And that too is a gift of absence. But when nostalgia does hit, when it does arrive, it lands differently.
Not because you demanded it,
but because you allowed it the space to take root. And in doing so, you remind them not just of who you were, but of who they were when they were with you. And that, more than anything, is what people miss. You were their mirror. You were their moment of peace. You were their connection to something better, deeper, more whole. And now, you're not there. So what lingers? That's the power of graceful withdrawal. It doesn't slam doors. It leaves windows open just enough for the breeze to stir the soul. Now ask yourself, have you ever become nostalgic for someone who walked away with grace? Have you felt that subtle ache, that soft regret? If so, then you know the feeling you may one day inspire in someone else. If you've ever experienced that pull, or if you sense it may be happening now, I invite you to reflect below. Share a moment that still lives in your memory. Or if you're feeling that nostalgic echo right now, write this in the comments. I honor what was, but I return to myself. Let it be a compass pointing you home. We're about to take this even further, because walking away doesn't just leave an impression. In many cases, it flips the entire dynamic. 8. Shift the dynamic entirely. Every relationship, romantic, social, even professional, runs on an invisible current. This current is the dynamic. And like all currents, it has direction. One person leans in more. One adapts more. One gives more. One waits. One pursues. One retreats. And over time, unless intentionally redirected, that current becomes the default setting. Here's the problem. Once a dynamic becomes too fixed, too imbalanced, it becomes incredibly hard to change from within the system. You can have deep talks, you can express your needs, you can cry, you can compromise. But if the other person has grown accustomed to a dynamic where you do all the bending, none of your words will land. Because words don't shift dynamics, behavior does. And that's where walking away enters the picture. Not as a tactic, but as a complete energetic pivot. You interrupt the pattern. You flip the current. You upend the entire structure that had made your presence feel predictable, expected, even disposable. Why is this so effective? Because human beings rarely change without disruption. The brain is wired for pattern recognition. It wants safety, familiarity, routine. Even when those routines are dysfunctional, they're still easier than change. But when you walk away, when your emotional labor, attention, and presence are suddenly gone, it forces an emotional reckoning. You remove the stabilizing force, and now the other person has to recalibrate. Suddenly, the power dynamic is no longer tilted. There's a void, a silence, a lack of comfort, and whether they admit it or not, they feel it. Because you were never just a person. You were a source of energy, presence, warmth, rhythm. And now that energy has been withdrawn. Now let's go deeper. What does this shift actually do? It forces reflection. It forces reevaluation. It forces them to confront the imbalance that you may have been silently carrying for weeks, months, even years. When you are always the one to repair the connection, you create an unconscious belief in their mind. They'll always be here. When you're always initiating, they assume your interest is permanent. When you're always smoothing over tension, they believe the relationship's health depends entirely on you. And so, their effort shrinks. Their self-awareness fades. Their respect erodes. Not out of malice, but out of human nature. People stop valuing what seems guaranteed. But when you break that pattern, when you stop showing up with your usual softness, your usual effort, your usual availability, it sends an unmistakable message. You cannot take me for granted. And that message speaks louder than any late-night monologue or emotional plea. The Stoics understood this dynamic on a personal level. They knew that power lies in detachment. Not cold withdrawal, but principled presence. Seneca said, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." Stop expecting their change. Live your change. Shift your pattern. And here's what often happens next. When the current is interrupted, the person on the receiving end feels destabilized. For the first time, they begin to wonder, where did their attention go? Why did they stop trying? Did I miscalculate their feelings? Did I lose something I hadn't even acknowledged? And this self-doubt, this moment of questioning, is often the turning point. Now, does this always lead to reconciliation or recognition?
No.
But even when it doesn't, you've won something greater. Freedom from a dynamic that was diminishing your sense of self. When you stop playing your part, the entire performance must change or collapse, and either outcome serves your growth. Let's be blunt. You cannot transform a one-sided relationship from within the walls of that same pattern. You must exit. You must disrupt. You must walk differently. Only then can the dynamic shift, either into a rebalance or into an ending, and both outcomes bring you closer to alignment. So let me ask you, where in your life are you locked into a dynamic that feels unfair, unreciprocated, unspoken but heavy? And if you've had the strength to walk away and watch that dynamic crumble or rebalance, share your experience. Or simply affirm it in the comments with this phrase: "When I shift, the whole dynamic must follow." Let that be your mantra. And now, let's go one level higher. Let's talk about becoming the thing people are drawn toward. Not because you try to be, but because you already are. 9. Become the challenge. In every relationship, consciously or not, people are measuring challenge and comfort. Comfort is beautiful. It's necessary. It's the warmth of being accepted, the ease of being seen. But too much comfort, too early, kills desire. Why? Because desire is born in tension, in reach, in effort, in uncertainty. And that's where the idea, of becoming the challenge enters. Not as a game, not as a manipulation, but as a deeply rooted way of being. The kind of challenge that emerges when someone knows their worth so deeply they can't be easily won. You don't give your energy to just anyone. You don't become emotionally available by default. You don't chase. You don't over-explain. Why? Because you know yourself. You know that your time, your presence, your peace, these are earned through mutuality, not extracted through begging. This isn't arrogance. This is emotional sovereignty. And this, perhaps more than anything, is what makes a person magnetic. Because challenge triggers desire. Not in the childish sense of being aloof or hard to get, but in the adult sense of being rare, being high standard, being rooted. In our culture, people often equate challenge with difficulty or hostility, but that's surface-level thinking. Real challenge is not antagonism, it's elevation. Being around you demands more of the other person. They have to rise to meet your integrity. They have to bring presence, honesty, intention. They can't coast. They can't manipulate. They can't play small. And that makes you unforgettable. Now here's the key. You can't fake this. You can't pretend to be a challenge. You either are or you're not. And becoming one isn't about projecting hardness. It's about doing the inner work, building your emotional discipline, sharpening your standards, healing your need for approval, and anchoring yourself in purpose. The Stoics called this the cultivation of the self, not for ego, but for virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." You don't become the challenge by withholding affection. You become it by being a complete person, with a life that is full with or without someone else in it. And that's what makes people curious. That's what draws them in. That's what creates the pull. When someone knows they cannot easily gain your commitment, they lean in harder. When they know you're not desperate to be chosen, they question their own value. When they sense that you walk through life with direction, purpose, and standards, they see you differently. You are not a prize to be won through tricks. You are the mirror that reflects who they truly are when faced with someone who knows themselves. This is also why walking away at the right moment magnifies your power. Because walking away isn't passive. It's declarative. It says, I am not here to be convinced. I am here to be met. And here's the secret. When you are truly a challenge, your silence echoes louder than another person's shouting. Your absence weighs more than their presence. Your energy lingers, not because you tried to impress, but because you were whole. And then you were gone. This is the legacy of someone who refuses to be chased while they beg. Someone who stands tall in their boundaries. Someone who would rather walk alone than crawl for crumbs. So ask yourself, are you the challenge or the convenience? If you've reached a place where you no longer compromise yourself just to be kept around, share your truth below. Say, I am not a convenience. I am a standard. Let the world know you've leveled up, and you're not lowering your bar for anyone. Coming up next, we approach the culmination of everything we've explored. The boldest move of all, the walk away itself. Not as threat, not as manipulation, but as the ultimate power play in reclaiming your self-respect. 10. The boldest move is walking away. There are few moments in life more defining than the one where you choose to walk away, not in anger, not in haste, not in retaliation, but with calm, focused intention. That moment changes everything. Because walking away is not just the end of a conversation. It is the start of a new chapter in your inner evolution. It is the moment you declare to yourself and to the world, I will not compromise my peace, my worth, or my path any longer. Understand this. Walking away is not about proving anything to them. It's about proving everything to yourself. It is not a tantrum. It is not a tactic. It is not a performance. It is the boldest assertion of self-respect a person can make. Because to walk away means you trust yourself more than you trust their promises. It means you value your standards more than you fear their absence. And it means you are willing to lose comfort in order to reclaim truth. But let's not romanticize this. It hurts. It hurts to withdraw from someone you once imagined a future with. It hurts to let go of the illusions you built. It hurts to say goodbye to the version of yourself that settled, tolerated, hoped, waited. That version was trying. That version believed. But now that version is done. The boldest move is walking away with nothing but your integrity intact. No need for revenge. No need for final words. Just a calm exit. A quiet departure. A decision that echoes louder than any speech ever could. Here's what most people don't tell you. Walking away doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring differently. You stop placing their feelings above your sanity. You stop prioritizing potential over reality. You stop loving others at the expense of loving yourself. And the effect? Earth-shifting. The power dynamic rewrites itself overnight. The energy realigns. Suddenly, the person who once thought they could take you for granted feels the silence, feels the loss, feels the echo of what used to be readily available, but is now gone. Because here's what they start to realize. You were the calm in the chaos. You were the anchor in the drift. You were the steady hand, the understanding heart, the forgiving presence. And now, you are a memory they didn't know they'd miss until you became one. This is the power of leaving before you're emotionally bankrupt. Before you lose yourself completely. Before the final straw breaks you down into someone unrecognizable. The boldest move is not slamming the door. It's walking through it with grace and never looking back. And when you do that, when you walk away, not just physically, but emotionally, you begin to rise, not out of pride, but out of alignment. You begin to feel your strength again. You begin to feel your clarity, your voice, your essence. You remember who you were before you were trying so hard to be enough for someone else. The boldest move is walking away and meaning it, not hoping they chase you, not waiting for the phone to light up, not pacing your room, refreshing your feed, looking for a sign. No, the boldest move is walking away and facing forward, knowing that even if they come back, you will not go back. Because the old version of you that tolerated that dynamic no longer exists. The Stoics called this freedom. A state of being unshaken. A detachment not born of coldness, but of clarity. They understood that walking away from anything misaligned is not loss. It is gain. It is expansion. It is truth. So if you're on that edge right now, if you're wondering whether it's time, ask yourself, who am I becoming by staying? And who might I become if I finally let go? You already know the answer. If you've walked away in the past and grown stronger because of it, share your story in the comments. Or if you're standing at the edge of that decision now, I walk away not to hurt, but to heal. Let that be your new beginning. Conclusion. And now we've come full circle. You've seen it, how walking away, when done with clarity and self-respect, isn't weakness. It's power. Not a trick to gain attention. Not a manipulation to spark regret, but a declaration that you value yourself enough to leave the table when respect is no longer being served. You've learned how walking away anchors your value in action, not in words. Sparks craving through absence, cultivates curiosity through space, reveals truth through silence, shifts the entire relational dynamic, triggers nostalgia that lingers long after you're gone, and most of all, how it allows you to become not the one chasing but the one chosen. If and only if it's aligned. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to explain 1,000 times. You don't need to beg or fix or prove. You just need to know who you are and walk in that. If this video stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your strength, your clarity, or your worth, subscribe to the Everlasting Stoic. This is a place where we go deeper, where we don't chase tricks, but transformation. Like this video to signal the algorithm that more people need this kind of wisdom. And in the comments, tell me, what moment in your life did walking away change everything? Or just right? I choose peace over presence. Let the community hear you. Let others know they're not alone in choosing themselves, even when it's hard. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, walk wisely, and never forget your absence can be a more powerful message than your presence ever was. Stay grounded. Stay sovereign. Stay stoic.